Welcome to Bryan on Brass. My name is Bryan, and on this video we're going to look at 3 different types of baritones and euphoniums for use in the marching band setting to kind of find out which one is the best to use in marching band. So after hearing some of the instruments, I want to give some kind of feedback on what I heard, what I feel like as a player, and kind of guide the discussion around what is the best for both a player and for a director. So first, we're going to look at the marching baritone. So with the marching baritone, there's a few reasons why you would want to march with the marching baritone. One, it feels very lightweight compared to the others. It's kind of evenly distributed in terms of weight. It's a little front heavy, but is generally pretty comfortable to hold, generally pretty comfortable to march with as well, just kind of due to its size. But the issue with the marching baritone is that it gets more of that edgier sound. So it just depends on kind of what you're looking for. The marching baritone tends to blend a lot easier with the trombones. And that's just kind of how the bore system works with it. It basically stays the same bore size through the majority of the instrument, and then it kind of flares out towards the end, just like a standard baritone horn, but also like a trombone. Trombone also features that type of bore system. So because of that, the marching baritones typically blend a lot better with the trombones. So in addition to that, these usually take a lot less air to produce a big sound on. You usually can get a really good sound in terms of volume way easier on a marching baritone compared to the other horns that we looked at. The con to that, and it just depends on what kind of sound profile that you're looking at, that can give us a little bit more of an edge. So the louder we play, the more the more of the edge we get, the more of the kind of unrounded sound or unrounded tone that we tend to get when these tend to get much, much louder. Me personally, playing wise, it's better for the longevity of playing. It doesn't feel as fatiguing to play on. And from a band director standpoint, typically because these are so much easier to hold, so much easier to play on, is easier for maybe our 9th and 10th grade students who are joining marching band for the first time. This will probably be easy for them to be able to jump on without too much of a difference in terms of what they're used to probably on the middle school level. So there's that advantage, but it does sound more like a trombone. So if you want that separation of that trombone and euphonium sound, the marching baritone is not going to be the way to go. So with the marching baritone, you're going to see this a lot commonly in many American high school bands. So this is probably the first time a lot of people even played on a baritone was a marching baritone compared to the euphoniums. Okay, so next we have the bell front euphonium. So with the bell front euphonium, this is a very unique instrument in that it kind of gets some of the characteristics of a baritone horn as well as the characteristics of a euphonium. So this, by definition, is a euphonium, which the basic idea is that the bore size starts at a smaller size, and then as the tubing goes on, it gradually gets larger and larger and larger until it flares out into the bell. So that's what we would call the conical tubing, meaning it starts from a smaller point and gets bigger, compared to the cylindrical tubing that we found on the marching baritone, where it pretty much stays the exact same bore size through the majority of the instrument. So what that does to the sound, it rounds out the sound more. It gives it something more akin to a French horn or a tuba sound when you have that type of tubing and bore. What may put a lot of people off is just how the instrument looks. We still have a bell front, so that is that's very good in terms of where you want the sound projection to be. So the actual sound projection still goes forward. They take a small bore-sized mouthpiece, so small shank mouthpiece, but the bell sizes are usually kind of that in between of a euphonium and a baritone. So usually the bigger baritone bells are kind of close to this, and then the smaller euphonium bells are closer to this. What that means is it can project pretty well, and with most marching baritones, they're going to have a big bell size. The other way to kind of round out the sound to both the marching baritone and the bell front euphonium is just using a deeper cup. So maybe like a Bach 5G, Bach 3G. That's going to help round them out a little bit. In terms of marching, some might find this to be a little bit more awkward to march with. The great thing is the weight distribution is way easier on here. So there's different ways you can hold it. You can hold it where this left hand is supporting at the bottom, left hand at the top or the center. In college, when we marched with these, the best way we found was just take the left hand, kind of put it in between the loop, and then you kind of grab the instrument like so. And it actually is pretty comfortable with this configuration. The other reason why I love using this style of horn for marching band is that in its essence, this is a concert horn. That's where its roots came from. The American style euphonium was always intended to be mostly a concert horn. And then you had some professional euphonium players like Leonard Falcone, who actually performed on bell front euphoniums. So what this does is it gives you a lot more rounded sound compared to the marching baritone, but it can really open up when it comes to volume. So if you want that edge, when this plays in louder volumes, you get a more trombone sound. But when you play this at softer volumes, you get a traditional, closer to a traditional euphonium sound. And it's kind of the best of both worlds. So usually that's why I tend to gravitate towards these type of horns. Speaking as a band director, the tone quality that you're going to get from these horns, you're going to hear the difference compared to the marching baritones. And because these are concert horns at the end of the day, if you're a band director and you have to buy a set of horns, it might be good to just go with these bell fronts, because hey, I can use these for both the marching band setting as well as the concert band setting, without having to buy a separate set of marching horns and a separate set of concert horns. So if you're a band director and you were thinking of going that direction, I would buy a set of these, knowing that, hey, they're going to be used for marching band and concert band, and then probably invest in some top level euphoniums for your concert band. So maybe for your top band or for your more advanced students. So that's when you expend that money for the Best in Sovereigns, Best in Prestige, the Yamaha Customs, Yamaha Neos. You would kind of spend that extra money for those top level horns for your concert band, but these can still function very well in a concert band setting. And as I said, if you want to round out and give it a better, more deeper and more rounded sound, you can go with a bigger mouthpiece size, like a 5G, 3G, or 1G. That's going to kind of help round this out to be a more substantial concert horn. And lastly, we have the marching euphonium. So with the marching euphonium, one, you can hear the difference in terms of tone quality. It has a nice, dark, rich sound. And when you have a section of marching euphoniums, you really get a different blend when compared to the trombone. So now you have different tone colors that you can really work with. You can have this nice kind of dark, kind of really, for lack of better words, concert sound into your section that can really round out the sound of what the trombones are doing. So if maybe there's parts written where trombones are doing something very differently than the euphoniums, then this can really shine and this can really stand out. Your baritone euphonium section can really stand out with marching euphoniums because of the just very vastly different characteristic sound that this brings. Cons: it is a very heavy instrument. It's a significantly heavier instrument. Excuse me. It is a significantly heavier instrument, and because of that, fatigue will get to your students. So if you're a high school band director and you want that nice, dark, rich sound within that marching band setting, you can go for these. But just know that these horns are very heavy, and students having to hold this for prolonged hours or for a prolonged time is going to affect them. So just know from that standpoint, the weight is not really distributed very well. It's very top heavy. So a lot of the weight you feel in the bell section of this horn. In addition to that, this horn takes a lot of air. This takes the most air out of all of the other horns. So I find myself, if I'm playing on a marching euphonium, I'm taking a lot more quicker sips of air to try to refuel, just so I can really put some air into this horn. And with that being said, visually it does look very, very nice. You have this huge oversized bell compared to the other ones, and from a visual standpoint, these look so good when you have it in line, when everyone is kind of have the right horn angle. So if you're a director who appreciates the look of the ensemble a lot in terms of the marching band and the field show aspect, again, these look very fantastic onto the field. So it comes down to a lot of personal preferences, both from the player and as the director, of what do you want from this. So if you want a nice, dark, rich sound, but you have the players that can support it with a lot of air, with a lot of quality of tone, and can sustain and hold out in terms of volume, in terms of technique, in terms of phrasing, then the marching youth is the way to go. If you want, kind of that nice in between, that bell front euphonium is going to give you exactly what you need. It's going to have a nice rounded sound. It's going to give you that edge when you need to at higher volumes. Once the students kind of get used to it, it's a very comfortable instrument to hold, and it can double as a concert instrument, which as a director, that could save you money without having to buy two separate sets of horns for your euphonium players. And then lastly, you have the marching baritone. If you want something that blends well with the trombones, something that has that edge and kind of that bite to it, or if you want that nice kind of like ping sound to it, that's where the marching baritone, that's where that shines. So hope you all enjoyed this kind of demonstration of sound and kind of run through of the different types of horns that you can use for your marching band or in your marching band for your baritone and euphonium line. So my name is Bryan. This has been Bryan on Brass. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.